Welcome to this video lesson on the ObjectID system. Today we'll see how to create our decentralized identity with ObjectID. To access the platform, you need two pieces of information: your decentralized identity and a seed. Unlike typical applications, there is no username and password, and therefore no registration step. This is a distributed application. So what you need to access the system is an identity that is independent from the specific application and can also be used in other contexts. Usually this identity is managed through a wallet. But to keep things simple, in this case, the application itself acts as a wallet. You will enter the seed, which is essentially a master key that generates the private keys used to sign requests. If you do not have an identity yet, you need to open the Identity Management page. So let's see how to create an identity on this page. First, you need to choose whether to create an identity on the testnet or the mainnet. The testnet is useful for experimentation, but the data stored on it is not persistent. The procedure is the same in both cases. So for this example, we will use the testnet. You can now enter a seed manually, or for simplicity, you can click the dedicated button to generate one. Keep in mind that this is a distributed application. This means that this data never leaves your device's memory and is not stored by the platform. From the seed, the application automatically generates a cryptographic key pair, public and private. And from these, it derives an address on the IOTA blockchain. It then checks the blockchain to see whether this address holds an IOTA Identity Controller Cap, which is a data container that grants control of a decentralized identity to whoever controls that address. If no controller cap is found, you can create your identity by clicking the dedicated button. Okay. The application has created your decentralized identity, compliant with the W3C DID standard. As you can see, it is an identifier composed of a scheme DID, a method IOTA testnet, and a unique identifier. This DID corresponds to a DID document stored on the selected network, in our case, IOTA testnet network. The DID document contains various pieces of information that allow you to use your identity for different purposes, such as signing documents, identifying yourself to online service providers, and more. Note that none of the information involved is sensitive, so there is no issue publishing it on the blockchain. On the contrary, since it is recorded on a public blockchain, anyone can retrieve it and verify your identity using the public key contained in the DID document, without relying on any third party. This is the meaning of decentralized identity. If you are creating an identity in order to obtain ownership of an object created by someone else, or to create events related to objects created by others, your identity setup is now complete. I strongly recommend saving your identity and seed using the following procedure. Click the Save Seed in an encrypted file button. Optionally fill in the hint field to help you remember the password. Choose a file name, and then enter the password that will be used to encrypt and decrypt the seed. Finally, click Save. The ObjectID application will store a file on your device that you can later use to reload your identity and seed in a simple and secure way. Make a backup copy of this file and keep it in a safe place. There is no other way to recover the seed. The identity we have created so far is anonymous, so it does not provide any elements to link the objects and documents you create to a real-world entity. To make it meaningful, you must link it to an internet domain that you control. Here is the procedure. Click the dedicated button, enter the domain you want to associate with your identity, and then click Link. The ObjectID application will update your identity's DID document by adding a reference to your internet domain. Now, your identity is linked to your internet domain, and this can be verified through the corresponding DID document. However, this is still a self-declaration that anyone could make. To prove that you actually control the domain, you need to create a Domain Linkage Verifiable Credential, DLVC. This is a file containing cryptographic proof that your identity controls the domain, and it must be publicly accessible from your website. This makes it possible to verify both that your identity is linked to the domain and that the domain confirms that link. The ObjectID application can generate this file for you. Click the Download DLVC button. The next step is slightly more technical, as it requires access to the directory on your web server that contains your website content. If you are not familiar with this procedure, you should ask your hosting provider or a technical professional for assistance. Access the server with a SFTP client and locate the directory that contains your website content. Check whether there is a hidden folder named .well-known. If it does not exist, create it and make sure it is publicly accessible. Enter the .well-known folder and check whether a file named did-configuration.json is present. If it is not there, upload the file you downloaded from ObjectID and rename it to did-configuration.json. If the file already exists, open the file you obtained from ObjectID, copy the JSON web token, the long alphanumeric string, and add it to the list inside the existing did-configuration.json file. Each of these tokens is a verifiable credential signed by an identity. If you do not want to revoke a previously linked identity, do not remove its corresponding token. When you later create an identity on the IOTA mainnet, you will need to add the new JWT generated by the application for that identity as well. This is necessary because an identity exists only on a specific network, so you need one identity for the testnet and a separate one for the mainnet. Now let's verify that the web server is correctly serving the did-configuration.json file. Open the URL, composed of your internet domain, followed by .well-known/did-configuration.json. You should see the content of the file you uploaded or modified, including the credentials of the identities linked to your domain. If you receive an error, the file is likely inaccessible due to security restrictions. In that case, contact your web hosting service provider and request support. If you can see the file content correctly, return to the ObjectID Identity Management page and reload your seed from the encrypted file you previously created. Now there is one final step: obtaining an OID Controller Cap. This is a blockchain object issued by the ObjectID Oracle that verifies the correctness of the link between your decentralized identity and your internet domain. The controller cap is required by the ObjectID smart contract in order to create objects that reference your website. Anyone who does not possess this controller cap cannot create objects that illegitimately point to your domain. This is a core security mechanism of ObjectID. Click the dedicated button to receive your OID controller cap on your IOTA blockchain address. Your decentralized identity setup is now complete. Thank you for following this lesson. See you in the next video.